Research has made it clear that about 60% of all multi-millionaires are self-made. And what that simply goes on to prove is the point that multi-millionaires do not stumble and then fall into wealth. As opposed to that, they have skills and habits that eventually help them to steer themselves into these positions. And so in today's video, we'll be looking at the 11 skills that multi-millionaires master and how you can actually adopt these skills and eventually steer yourself towards the attainment of your financial goals. This brings us to the first skill, and that is critical thinking skills. So multimillionaires know one thing, that your ability to think through problems would eventually help you to deliver value, and with that value delivery comes what is known popularly as wealth. And so how can you actually make sure that your decisions are devoid of emotions? That is one thing that they master. They try as much as possible to subordinate any other emotional interest in order to find the right decisions or the right choices to solve problems and then eventually deliver value to people. And then in exchange of that delivery, then they go on to get money. That is one thing that you need to know, that your ability to think critically through issues and be devoid of any emotional choices would eventually help you or steer you towards the attainment of your financial goals. The second skill that multimillionaires actually master is the skill of persuasion. So they try as much as possible to arrive or to get people to make decisions by manipulating them or finding ways and means to motivate them to make those choices in their interest. And that is something that most people consider to be a bad thing. But that is a skill set that if you really want to build and sustain wealth, you need to know. Try as much as possible and then harness your persuasion skills. Try and then deliver to people in a way and in a manner that would also get them to make choices or to get things done in your interest. And that isn't in any way a bad thing. What you have to do instead is to learn or to sit down and then ask yourself, how can I increase my persuasion skills? And that can only be done with constant practice. Journaling is also another way that you can also help yourself to build that persuasion skills and to elevate yourself to the heights that you actually ascribe or probably hope to reach in the near future. This brings us to the third multi-millionaire skill, and that is time management. Now, we've all heard this time and time again, but it becomes very, very difficult for us to stick to those decisions and then ensure discipline when it comes to time management. And so the simplest way that you can manage your time is to sit down and then ask yourself, what are the things that really ensure my satisfaction? What are the things that are likely to steer me towards the attainment of my goals? And trust me when I tell you that if you're to subscribe to the 80-20 rule, which simply says that 80% of the results actually come from just 20% of your inputs, then that would help you in the long run to get to your goals. Because this is the easiest thing. Try and then find the 20% of inputs or the 20% of things that you have to do in order to arrive at that goal. And then anytime that you focus on that 20%, you're more likely or you increase your chances of hitting that goal by 80%. And so for instance, if you have the goal, like most people do at the beginning of the year, to lose weight, and of course 95% of people give up on those goals even mid-year. And so what you can do is to focus on the 20% of things that you have to do. Probably it might be for you to eat healthily or to run a mile every single morning or anything that is likely to help you to get to that goal. The 20% of those inputs would eventually just steer you towards 80% or push you 80% along the line to attaining your goals. And so don't focus on everything at the same time. Try and then find those 20% of things and then focus on them. And then in the long run, you'll become more and more productive. That is the best way and the best proven way to actually manage your time. This brings us to the fourth skill, and that is problem solving skills. Now, more often than not, people think building wealth has to do with one thing, that is you becoming lucky or getting passed down some form of inheritance. But contrary to this, what people do is that they deliver value, and in exchange for that value, people tend to give them money. And so what you can do simply is to try and then find a problem, solve that problem by delivering value, and then people would in return give you money. So one thing that you need to know, one skill set that you want to harness or improve upon is your ability to solve problems, because that is what eventually makes you more valuable even in your 9 to 5. And then compare yourself at this point to most people out there. If you really want to stand out and to become more valuable or to stand tall amongst all of them, the best thing you can do is to harness the power of your ability to actually solve problems. That is the way that the world goes. It actually delivers value to people who solve problems. For instance, look at Elon Musk. We know that our carbon footprints over the years have actually surged. But how then do we bring it down to normal and then reduce global warming? The only way that we can do that is actually to invent something that also helps us to cut down on our carbon emissions. And that is Tesla. So he's delivering value to the world, and then in return, the world is giving him money, which has eventually steered him towards the richest man status in the whole world. This brings us to the fifth skill, and that is financial literacy. So one thing that multimillionaires tend to do more often than not is to read. They subject themselves to education several hours every single day. Now, according to several findings, the average multimillionaire reads one book every single week. That is up to 4 books every single month, and that helps them to make the right choices and then to make the right decisions when it comes to picking the best investment and protecting and then sustaining their wealth in the long run. This brings us to the sixth multimillionaire skill, and that is self-discipline. So one of the surest ways for you to hit your goals is to be self-disciplined. But one thing that you also need to know is that motivation isn't enough, and skills or talent sometimes might even be reduced when it comes to the pursuit of your goals. What you need to know is that constantly contributing or making an input towards your goals is one of the surest ways for you to get to it. But how then do you find the right motivation to stay disciplined and then to, more importantly, steer yourself towards the attainment of your goals? Because one thing that most people tend not to have, and that makes them in the long run to give up on their goals, is motivation. Napoleon Hill says that in order for any man or woman to see some success in life, one of the key things that they need to have is enthusiastic support. And so this is what you need to know. Try as much as possible and then write down the goal that you want to achieve. Break that goal into tiny actionable steps that would in the long run ensures that you have the requisite motivation to carry through when it comes to the pursuit and the subsequent attainment of that goal. And more importantly, track the progress of your goal or where you are currently when it comes to the pursuit and the attainment of that goal. These are the surest ways for you to see self-discipline and to ensure that you motivate yourself every step along the way when it comes to the pursuit and the subsequent attainment of your goals. This brings us to the seventh multi-millionaire skill, and that is networking. More often than not, anytime that we ask ourselves, what is networking actually really about? People think it is all about you getting to know people and then those people delivering some value to you. But the surest way for you to build wealth is to deliver value to other people. So network to deliver value to people and not to get value from people. One of the easiest ways for you to lose some connections with people is to always expect them to deliver and not you returning that favor. The best way to actually go about networking is to give yourself some time and then think through it. Ask yourself the simple question: how can I be useful to people around me? How can I become useful to probably people at my workplace or even to my employees or probably even to my clients? The surest way for you to actually network, which would in the long run actually ensure your success, is to find ways and means to deliver value to people. So it's not only about getting to know people or getting people to get you something, but more often than not about you actually delivering value to people. This brings us to the eighth multi-millionaire skill, and that is adaptability. And that simply means that you need to get married to your goal and not the process. One of the key reasons why people fail in life when it comes to the attainment of their goal is what is popularly known as escalation of commitment. So they know very well that this process might be problematic in that it wouldn't take them towards the attainment of their goals, but simply they still commit to those processes, knowing very well that it wouldn't in the long run be effective or be efficient. The easiest way for you to actually get yourself to hit your goals and to steer yourself possibly towards a multi-millionaire status is to try and ask yourself the simple question: is this process really relevant in that is it effective and efficient when it comes to the attainment of my goals? If it isn't, then be free to actually adjust things. Try as much as possible to adjust your sails to reach that destination, because that is one of the surest ways for you to see success in life. This brings us to the ninth multi-millionaire skill, and that is lifelong learning. So one of the reasons why they tend to see so much success in their lives is that constantly they're always learning and they're always open to people actually giving them information or subjecting themselves to education in a way and manner that would make them effective and efficient in the discharge of their duties. Someone like Warren Buffett reads on average 4 hours every single day, and that helps him to make informed decisions in his capacity as CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, in that he's able to know what is happening on the stock market and, more importantly, to make an informed decision when it comes to picking stocks and then subsequently delivering value to his shareholders. This brings us to the 10th multi-millionaire skill, and that is emotional intelligence. Now, according to psychology, every human being is an emotional being, in that we are more likely to respond to problems and to issues emotionally as opposed to actually subjecting those problems to logic. But what the ultra-rich do is that they subject their problems to logical reasoning. And so what you need to know and what you need to do is to try as much as possible and then learn how to emotionally control yourself, in that you have to subordinate any emotional desires for what is popularly known as your logical desires. So prioritize logic when it comes to response towards problems and issues as opposed to constantly resorting to emotions. Because what that simply does is that it actually doesn't really make you effective or efficient when it comes to decision making. This brings us to the 11th skill, and that is vision setting or visualization simply. So they see the end right from the beginning. And that is one of the key ways and the easiest way to motivate yourself. Because when the why is clear, the how actually becomes easier. When you know where you're sailing towards, it becomes extremely easy for you to know which tempest or which storm is favorable. Because when you don't know where you're sailing towards or the destination that you want to reach, then every storm becomes unfavorable for you. But when you know where you're going, then you know very well that these are the things that I've got to do, and these are the decisions that I've got to make. These are the things that I don't have to do or have to refrain from in order for me to steer myself towards the attainment of my goals. And so these are the 11 essential skills that you need to master in order to steer yourself towards becoming a multi-millionaire or possibly even a billionaire. Thank you for spending time with us, and see you in the next video.